Hi, everybody. Welcome to San Diego Regional Urban Forest Council 2021 virtual mode. That's how we roll today. We used to do these in person, but we're doing these virtual these days, which is the reality of COVID, but all is good. We've got an awesome program set for today. As you can see on the screen here, we have our agenda. Which will kind of start with welcome and introductions. Then we're going to go into the presentation. We've got two awesome presenters that are going to talk about how to manage risk for public safety and consider that what's healthy San Diego urban forest. So that'll be awesome. We're going to take a break at 12, from 12 to 12:15. And I know that's only 15 minutes, but since this is virtual, you can still eat your lunch beyond that. So the thought is go secure yourself a lunch, come back, and then we're going to jump into the what we call the business portion of the meeting. We've got some really good updates this afternoon on a variety of things that affect a lot of urban forest stakeholders here in San Diego. And then we'll conclude at 1:30. If we get done sooner, we conclude a little early, but that's kind of the mission of the day, is to get through this agenda. So a little bit of background. So this is the San Diego Regional Urban Forest Council. We are a regional council in association with California Urban Forest Council. That's a lot of saying the word council a lot there, but there are 7 councils throughout the state. We're all affiliated again with California Urban Forest Council. Basically, we're just a group of stakeholders in urban forestry, everything from private sector, public sector, nonprofits, a lot of different public agencies. So we're all here supporting one another. At least we're targeting San Diego in general, but really, what we can do as a group. We have an executive committee that meets every month, and we hold these meetings every other month with a goal of trying to educate, all of us together here with bringing in these resources, and then also seeing where we can support one another when it comes to urban forestry issues and moving the needle on urban forestry, because I think more and more of the benefits of trees are starting to be further recognized, and there's some great things that are happening that we're on the precipice of. It's a big word. So with that said, I'd like to kind of do some kickoff here to start our event. So Liz, you want to give me the next slide here? So yeah, this is going to be our topic today. And I'd like to welcome Sam Rensberry. He's the Public Works Supervisor for the City of Santee, certified arborist. He's got his Department of Pesticide Regulation qualified applicator, and he's a certified playground inspector, and all-around good dude. Sammy's the man. He's an awesome fisherman too, which is ridiculous because I can't catch anything. And then the other presenter is another awesome dude, Tim Crothers. He's the Plant Healthcare Manager for West Coast Arborists. He's a ISA board certified master arborist, tree risk assessment qualified, and he's also a qualified applicator and also a really, really good dude. So we're grateful to have both of you guys here to do a panel presentation. A little bit of background on this program. This is brought to all of us by California Urban Forest Council. Received a grant from CAL FIRE, and it's called the City Forest Renewal Program. And essentially within it, there's a lot of deliverables, including removing hazardous trees from cities, working with cities on enhancing their urban forest policies and modifying them, and also educating the public. And part of that education is what Sam and Tim are about to deliver. So we're trying to educate the public and educate, stakeholders in trees on how to manage them appropriately and using some of the best management practices that are out there. So that's kind of the spirit of this. There's money that the Regional Forest Council is actually getting for putting this workshop on that's coming from the grant. We get $1,000 to be used for our program. So sorry, I got ahead here, but yeah, this is what this is from. Assessing public agency policies, procedures, enhancing the maintenance of how we do things, awarded from, again, it's awarded to California Urban Forest Council. And as you can see, it's funded by the Prop 68. And thank you, CAL FIRE, for helping this initiative move forward. And as you can see, there's some partners listed down below there. So why don't you go to the next slide? Okay, so just, I guess I'll touch this briefly. The webinar logistics, there will be polls shared throughout this webinar. We're looking to make this as interactive as possible, so that's kind of the mission of those polls. and the poll will be prompted by the presenter, and the poll, basically get an opportunity to give us some feedback. There'll be a scenario read off for your input, and then we'll see what the pulse of the group that's in attendance here, what we're all learning collectively. Once the poll's closed, you'll see the answer, you'll see where everybody is. Also, regarding CEUs, there will be an email that's shared with all attendees after the presentation's over, allowing you to get your CEUs. So, all right, next slide. Okay, I guess, am I doing this or? Yeah, I'll keep doing this. Okay, so webinar outcomes, our goal is to aid public agency arborists with ways on how to improve their urban forest programs, improve risk management techniques that are being used by public agencies, encourage comprehensive management activities to reduce risk long-term. There's a lot of risk in the urban forest, and if we do things right, we can, maximize the benefits of the trees while considering the risks associated with them. Leverage those benefits of the urban forest to maintain proper funding. Those are all ideal webinar outcomes from today's program. Next slide. Again, am I doing these? Okay, I keep doing this. Sammy, were you supposed to do these or am I supposed to do these?
You are my friend.
Okay, I'll keep doing them. All right, benefits of the proactive program approach. Ideally, we want to, reducing tree risk is a great starting point to better urban forest management program. Efficient work approach, tracking and managing your work history. You're going to be reducing your risk, reduce your number of tree failures, reduce infrastructure conflicts. And when you do all that, you're going to reduce the costs and maximize those benefits. And that's really an important thing, is getting the maximized benefits from your trees. All right, so this is our first opportunity at a poll. And after this poll, I will be handing it off to Sam to begin his part of the presentation. So what do we consider your level of tree risk? Let's go ahead and open up the poll and let's see where you all are in your world of arboriculture. So little to none, beginner, intermediate, meaning you're a certified arborist, or who's the expert level in the room here? How many track, or what are we looking at as track or board certified master arborist? So we'll give you a minute here to vote. And let's see what the answers are. Numbers are still coming in. All right, we'll give it another minute. Second. 78% of it. There's still 23% of you slacking out there. 22%. All right, well, I'll go ahead and just turn it over. Oh, I don't see the results, but oh, there we go. Interesting. Okay, so we've got quite a few beginners, some arborists, and some of the more expert level. So this is good. So I think there'll be a little bit of everything for all of you in this presentation on all levels, and we look forward to learning from some experts. So with that, let's go ahead and switch it over to the panel. Got it? No, I don't see it. If slideshow from there. It's in slideshow format, not, can you make it presentation format? Yeah, there you go. All right, so Tim, take it away.
All right, thanks. I'm happy to be here talking to all of you. Thanks for having me, and welcome to everybody. Maybe it's your first time or something. This is my second time speaking to this group, so I'm happy to be here. So let's go to the next slide. Here's a little bit about my background. So plant healthcare manager for West Coast Arborists here in Anaheim. So I travel where is needed. I supervise the data collection folks, the plant healthcare technicians, the certified arborists that are doing reports for us and for our customers. So, and then I help with the urban forest master plans, writing those ones. My background, bachelor's of science degree, environmental horticulture science from Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, board certified master arborist, utility and municipality specialties, track, registered consulting arborist, just as of a couple months ago, got that. So it's a good program. I highly recommend it. Qualified applicator's license, and A lot of landscape construction experience, landscape maintenance, and arboriculture. So kind of a well-rounded approach to everything in the landscape. Let's go to the next page. So before we can even talk about tree risk, you got to know what trees you have, right? So having a tree inventory is critical to managing your urban forest. So having that inventory, you're able to see a record of the location, characteristics, assessment of the trees within a certain grid area, or as a whole in your city. You can, with that information, you can change your operations as needed, be, reactive and proactive in your environments there based on what your needs are. Increase efficiency by having that inventory, you know where the trees are that you need to service, and track that work history over time. Document your actions through the work history, and by having this inventory, you can justify your budgets and bring that information to council and say, this is how many trees are in the city, this is the amount that we need, this is how we see the urban forest growing over the future, and what kinds of things to be aware of. Next slide. So what makes a useful inventory? So there's different attributes, obviously, for any inventory, but there's some of the basic ones right here. Location, so you got your address of a physical building or a park name perhaps, or facility name. You got your GPS sub-meter accuracy, so you can pinpoint where those locations are. That's obviously critical in park situations where trees are very close to each other and you need to know which tree it is that you're talking about and which one needs to be serviced. The species, obviously, you got to get that correct. The diameter, height, condition of the tree, those are all very important. Recommended maintenance is pretty critical. Knowing what surrounding infrastructure you have around the tree, if it's in a parkway situation, if there's utilities overhead, that's good to have as well. And with that inventory, then you can build your work lists, right? You can have those trees in inventory, put them on a list for service, date those off, and then you've got the work history tracked over time and know what it is that you're maintaining and when. And then you can obviously divide the districts accordingly based on your budgets if needed. So the importance of an up-to-date inventory, this is critical, right? Because trees are growing, the conditions change in the field, you're doing capital improvement projects, trees are having to be planted or being removed and stuff. So keeping that inventory up to date is of critical importance. So the better the data, the better the decision-making ability you have. So inventory collection, it's a snapshot of the urban forest at the time that it was collected, but it needs to be maintained. It needs to be updated regularly. There's obviously different ways to do that, and Sam will touch upon that. So it's constantly changing, growing, trees going in, trees coming out. And then the insurance company or insurance industry recommends that trees be inspected every 4 years. That's a minimum, right? You want to obviously inspect some trees more often than that based on their condition or their location, the species, maybe they're fast growing. So but a minimum 4 years is what the insurance industry recommends. Next slide. So in keeping with the inventory update, so update it regularly, have the most current information available, capture that data with images when possible, and store any reports that you make about the trees in that inventory, if there's a way to do that. PDF form is the best way to do that. Review your data regularly so that you are understanding what's going on in the forest and be able to make good presentations to council or to committees and things. And then utilize that data to plan your work and set your budgets. Next slide. So survey time. So there'll be a few of these surveys as we go through the presentation, kind of little case studies, not necessarily one correct answer. I just want to see kind of how people think about different situations in their communities. So here's an example. The city's approved a home remodel and a site re-landscaping plan, but it didn't include industry standards or specifications for protecting the coast live oak that you see in the center of the picture there, which is in the right of way and the city has to maintain. So there's a couple retaining walls that went in, and after those went in, the construction started, the tree went into decline. So as a city staff or forester or something, what would you do now? Would you require that the contractor remove the tree because it looks almost dead, replant it with a new tree? Would you wait and see perhaps, and maybe it'll come back to good health with some plant healthcare techniques or something? Would you perform a risk assessment because you intend to retain the tree for a while and it's right next to a road there? Would you take lamp samples, foliage, soil, figure out what's going on, perhaps C and D? So let's open the poll and see what people think. I think there's probably 2 more of these sample situations here, so hopefully you'll get something out of them. All right, let's see what people think here. All right, so majority, so it looks like C and D. So perform a risk assessment, take lab samples, that's a good way to go. Very good. Perform a tree risk assessment, wait and see. Yeah, I mean, that might be valid because, you know, the planning department, maybe they weren't really informed on how you as a forester manage the trees out there, and they don't have any ordinances that say you must do this or you must not do that. So let's go to the next slide and see what the coast live oak looks like now. There you go. That tree actually came back to health. So the wait and see, taking samples, risk assessment, that has been all good things to do. I noticed nobody said to remove the tree, so kind of happy to see that. So yeah, the tree really came back well. The contractor that was working on that project, they fertilized the tree, got some water to it again, and lo and behold, the tree came back. So next slide. So let's talk about tree risk now. Now we got a little bit of background and give an example situation out there. So what is tree risk? So out of the track manual, the tree risk assessment qualification from ISA, the definition is the combination of the likelihood of a conflict or tree failure occurring and affecting a target and the severity of the associated consequences. So in the background there, you can kind of see a sycamore tree with a couple main scaffold branches. The tree itself is leaning over a street, over towards wires. So this is an example of, you know, looking at a situation and determining what needs to be done. Let's go to the next slide. So what is a hazard? A hazard is different from risk. So a situation or condition in a tree that is likely to lead to loss, personal injury, property damage, disruption of activities, a likely source of harm. That's what a hazard is. So a hazard is, in relation to the tree itself or the tree part identified as the likely source of harm. In those pictures there, you can kind of see a Chinese elm branch right above where one was cut, and there's a crack forming, right? So one branch is removed, and now, you know, the tree is maybe perhaps out of balance, and that branch is itself now breaking. Down below, you see sulfur fungus on blue gum eucalyptus. So next slide. So risk factors to consider when you're doing a risk assessment. So those would be the targets around the tree itself, any protection measures that are in place. If the tree fell, it's going to fall on something before it gets to the target that you're assessing. Perhaps you know, what zone it is climate-wise or microclimate or something. Occupancy rates of the location. Site itself, the previous failures that have occurred there is something to consider. The conditions on the site, if there's been some construction activity perhaps. Weather, if you know that the location is subject to some wind funneling, wind tunnels, extreme winds perhaps. Any soil weaknesses, if it's sandy soil perhaps, maybe the tree is unstable and is showing signs of leaning perhaps. Tree health, vigor, vitality, pests, those are all things to consider. The loads that the tree will experience, and then of course the defects, right? So like in the picture that you see on the left-hand side there, a ficus tree that looks like it was topped at one time and then has attempted to regrow its canopy. All those branches weakly attached to a potentially decaying stump of a branch right there. So structural defects are really important to consider in tree risk assessments. So this is a situation, obviously, a large limb failure comes down in a park. You get the call, say, you know, what happened with this tree? Why did that branch fail? Sometimes you can't always tell from the ground. You need to go up in the tree. You can look at what fell, but it's a good idea to get up in the tree sometimes, and that's going to require a higher level of assessment than you typically do from the ground. Let's go to the next slide. So from the ground, you can see maybe the tree had some previous failures perhaps, or some large wounds from large branches that were removed potentially. So those would be sources of areas where decay can set in from fungi. But as we go up into the tree some more, next slide. Now you get a really good picture of what's actually happening up in the tree. So right below that text box right there, you can see the fungi that's actually growing from the point where the branch fell. And right next to where the branch fell are two large pruning wounds, right? So those large cuts right there allowed some fungi to get in, gets into the rest of the heartwood right there at that location. And just over time, it's decaying the heartwood of the tree, and eventually the load became too much on that defect right there. Go to the next slide. So the goal of tree inspections obviously would be to gather information on tree health, condition, and structure, document those items of concern for follow-up, identify the hazards before they cause harm, and identify trends and consistent challenges that you're having, right? If you know that a certain species is causing you problems, maybe it's time to look at some crown reductions on them or figure out what it is that you need to do. Let's go to the next slide. So routine inspection cycles. As I mentioned, the insurance industry would like tree contractors and municipalities, agencies to inspect trees regularly. So 4 years is what their goal is, right? So inspections may or may not be risk assessments. It really depends on the assignment. And there's no one size fits all answer to routine inspection cycle, because every community is different. You've got different budgets, you got different species of trees, different makeups. So you really need to look at your inventory and identify what are the potential problems that you have. How can you address them through your maintenance cycle? Urban forests are unique, and we want them to be unique. We want them to have diversity and things like that. So, as good as it would be to have a one size fits all, it's not really practical. But there are standards and best practices to follow. So routine inspection considerations, you need to ask these questions. Which trees should be inspected? That's where you go to the inventory. How often are they inspected? That's where you go to any policies, ordinances that you have in place, right? Look at those first and see if there's already documents to say when you have to do these inspections. How many inspections do your resources allow for? That's key to knowing. Are the inspectors qualified to perform the inspection? You want to have, ideally, track people doing those inspections, but they have to obviously do the risk assessments. But certified arborists, you want these certified folks, people with experience in doing inspections, to be doing them. Are there management plans, policies, ordinances, manuals, guidelines in place that already specify that, as we talked about? And then how is that inspection documented? Somebody has to document when that inspection took place. So doing that through the inventory system. If there's a file that's kept at the agency level, do it that way. But these inspections do need to be documented, because in the case of claims, they're going to ask who did the inspection and when did it take place and what did you see at that time. Next slide. So the inspected items should include, but are not limited to, lean root problems, codominant, multiple trunks perhaps, any cavities, cankers, mushrooms, decay, obvious signs of problems in the tree, cracks in trunks and branches, weakly attached scaffold branches. These are all typical things that you would inspect for prior to pruning a tree. Same thing for doing an inspection for risks or hazards, pests and diseases, other things like that. These are all key, and you can see some of the sample images right there of things to be looking for. This comes straight out of the Joint Powers Insurance Authority tree inventory and inspection policy. It's basically a guideline for the people of managing trees. Next slide. So you've got your inventory, you know what you need to do inspections. So let's take it to the next level. How do we assess risk? So there's 3 levels of risk assessment based on ANSI standards, ISA best management practices. You can see the acronyms right there in case for the beginners that they're not familiar with those. Let's go to the next slide. So here's the first level. So level 1, limited visual assessment. This is the most basic risk assessment that could be performed, and it's really meant for large populations of trees. So it's conducted from a specified perspective to identify obvious defects or specified conditions on trees with imminent or probable likelihood of failure. So a risk rating is optional, like it says right there above. You're trying to identify obvious defects, something that you need to act upon right away. So a level 1 may not be adequate always to provide a risk mitigation option because you're only performing the assessment from one side of the tree. So where you need more information, that's going to be a level 2. You're going to do a 360-degree walk around the tree. But you can see in the picture right there, you see some Canary Island pine trees, one's considerably greener than the other. So maybe during the limited visual assessment, you see something's wrong with that particular tree. If that fits within the assignment, then you would report that. Next slide. That's actually the same tree. That yellowing tree in the background actually did fall, and you can see had very few roots left, so it's kind of surprising that it lasted as long as it did and was even looking in the condition that it was. So level 1s might give you some hint as to where you need to dig a little further and do a level 2 assessment, that 360-degree walk around the tree. So a detailed visual assessment of the trees and its surrounding site, and basically a synthesis of the information collected. It's a ground-based inspection, so you're not going up in the tree. You're not going into a boom truck. You're doing it from the ground, completely around the tree, from the buttress roots up to the branches. That's what you're looking at. You're considering the shape of the tree, its surroundings. You're using simple tools that arborists use all the time, the diameter tape, binoculars, camera, any digging tools that you need to expose some roots at the surface and just get an idea of what's going on with the tree. So that's a level 2, and those happen quite frequently in our industry. The next level will be level 3, the advanced assessment. So that's where you're using some technology that requires some specific training on the part of those using it. So it might be sonic tomography, it might be resistance drilling, but the intent is to provide detailed information on specific tree parts that are not available in just the level 1 or the level 2. You might be using that specialized equipment. As I said, it takes expertise. You might be looking at information on the internet about weather at a site, looking at what happened if a tree fell, what was the weather happening before then. Any kind of technology that goes beyond just a basic inspection of a tree. So all technologies involve some uncertainty, and those limitations include the accuracy of the measurement. You have to keep those tools in proper working order, right? How well the sampling represents the condition and how well the data is interpreted is all key to giving that information to the customer and reporting an accurate risk assessment. So the controlling authority really needs to consider the value of the tree before doing a level 3 risk assessment, because they do take more time and not everyone can do it. Next slide. All right, so here's an example of that level 3 technology there. The sonic tomography is one tool that you put sensors around the tree, tap on the sensors, and they're measuring the time it takes from the time one sensor is tapped until the sound has traveled through the wood of the tree to those other sensors, and you'll get a readback or a reading. Next slide. So here's a sonic tomogram. So the green areas indicate sound wood potentially. You're trying to get an idea of where that sound traveled and how fast it moved through the tree. And the idea is that sound travels faster through dense wood as opposed to cavities or voids. So if it took longer for the sound to travel from 1 to 8 and 1 to 11 or 15 to 4, you're going to get a readback of what time it took, and then you can get an idea of what potentially is going on inside the tree. And maybe you want to use that technology then to do a follow-up with a different type of technology. That would be the resistance drilling, and get a more clear picture. Next slide. So here's another survey for you and an example situation. So let's say the city authorized a level 1 risk assessment to update their recommended maintenance in their inventory. So this Coast Live Oaks condition hasn't changed since its last inspection 2 years ago. It's still in fair to poor condition. There's an ordinance that says that rocks are not to be installed around the base of the tree, but you see that the resident has done that. So what would you do if you want to help this tree out? It's not looking all that great. So would you perform a level 2 risk assessment, remove the homeowner or remove the rocks, ask the homeowner to remove the rocks around the tree? Would you crown clean it, remove the dead wood, and just change its recommended maintenance to grid trim? Would you do nothing because those branches make good wildlife habitats? Or would you perform level 3 risk assessment, get some lamp samples, find out if there's any decay going on, perhaps A and B? So let's see what people think. All right, so we've got a whole bunch of people there. It would say A and B, so do a level 2 risk assessment on it, crown clean. Okay, very good. Some people say do nothing to it. All right, and a few more perform level 3 risk assessment. Okay, so varied opinions there. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, so as mentioned, we've talked about the levels of risk assessment there. So put it in a plug here right now for ISA, obviously. So the tree risk assessment qualification. The whole goal is, become qualified to make more informed decisions about trees and their management. So to be proficient in the fundamentals of limited visual and basic risk assessments, understand the principles behind those different diagnostic techniques, and get an accurate risk assessment as best you can. Gather and synthesize information needed to assess tree risk and make reasoned judgments so that you can justify those decisions that you make. Next slide. All right, so as mentioned in the inventory, one of the things that you would collect would be recommended maintenance. And that ties into risk as well, right? So one of the goals obviously is to enhance your inspections when you can. It's more than just the regular inspection before you prune a tree. You're not actually looking at risk. So you're looking at the targets around the tree. What are the consequences should something fail? It's really an enhanced inspection at this point. So mitigate the cause of risk. You want to obviously find those problems and then mitigate it. And then sometimes you might have to remove a tree. Let's go to the next slide. One of the things that might come out of your inspections, you might decide we need to enhance the cycle. Something needs to change. So discuss with arborists, your tree contractor, to determine the best course of action. Put trees on inspection work order lists more frequently, perhaps, based on species or based on condition or based on their location, utilities around them, whatever situation is necessary. Perform level 1, 2, 3 assessments as needed. High-risk trees, perhaps you make those into their own inspection cycle on a more frequent basis. Something to consider would be to track those inspections over time by using a calendar reminder. So maybe a certain number of trees, you put those on inspection every year or every 2 years or something, if it's they need to be seen more frequently than your routine prune cycle. Next slide. So you want to mitigate your cause of risk once you've identified what that risk is. So mitigate it. So it might be pruning the tree to reduce the size of it, modify the canopy somehow. Maybe there's just a few branches that need to come out to reduce that risk of failure. Tree cabling, bracing, those are still valid options. Adding those structural supports to the tree where needed. Plant healthcare techniques, maybe the tree looks in bad condition, but you don't see any structural defects, so maybe it's just a matter of bringing some health back to the tree, finding those underlying causes of what the decline is in the tree. Is it being overwatered? Is it underwatered? Is the nutrients not what it needs to be? Are there other factors involved? So doing a little more investigation as part of that mitigation is a good idea. Sometimes, transplanting trees. This is an extreme example. This is a deodar cedar that was transplanted in that same mature size as you see there. And so the tree was moved to a new park location. It's used as the holiday tree. It's lit every year. So it has high community value, right? It's transplanted to a more suitable location. It's cabled to ensure structural integrity. Soil injections are done. So they're taking a lot of care in it. This is all part of the mitigation, right? So if you've identified a potential risk, you're mitigating those risks. Next slide. And as mentioned, sometimes you have to remove the tree. And there's different reasons to remove a tree. It might be dead, disease, poor structure, tree spacing. It might not even have been planted. Maybe it's just a seedling or volunteer, and you don't want a palm tree growing underneath utility lines, perhaps. So there's different reasons for removal, and those also are identified during the risk assessments. Next slide. So the key is to be responsive, right? So you've got all this information at your hands now. You've got your inventory, you've done your inspections, you've done risk assessments, you have a risk rating, you've identified what trees are low risk, what trees are high risk, and you're performing your mitigation. So now it's time to be responsive. So a slow response time, it's going to mean potentially greater chance of failure and exposure to damage. So really consider, mitigate the risk at the time of the next grid pruning. If you know that the tree is scheduled for grid pruning very shortly, maybe you can take care of it then. Or if it's not going to be touched for a little while, perhaps you need to do a service request on it. What effect will the limb removal have on a tree structure? If you've identified defects, like you see here, some shot hole borer infesting one branch. If that branch is removed, what's that going to mean to the rest of the tree? Is it going to be out of balance? Perhaps. See, there's different factors to consider. Are there defects in the tree that need to be mitigated at the same time? So maybe you can do multiple things at once and maybe save some money instead of multiple call outs, perhaps. If there's, I see perhaps maybe some other factors, to take care of in the tree, the mistletoe, perhaps, anything, maybe do those all at the same time. Do what's beneficial for the tree and best for your forest in the long run. Next slide. So I think this is the last example scenario here. So a resident is having a party, goes to hang a piñata from the tree and sees this crack in the branch here, a shear plane crack. It's kind of hard to see, but in the shadows right there in between the more vertical branch and the horizontal one, there's actually a brace in between there and a large wound in that elm tree branch right above where the brace is. So perhaps that branch was swinging around quite a bit. So maybe what you do is you mitigate that risk by the aerial inspection of the crack, the support system, install more cables or braces perhaps. Another option would be call out an emergency crew, remove that branch, caution tape the front yard, restrict access to the target zone until somebody more qualified than you could get out there to see it. These are all examples of mitigation that happens out there in the field all the time. Next slide. All right, so it looks like it's time for Sam to speak to grid pruning and how you actually implement these policies, procedures, best practices in the field and managing the urban forest. So Sam, take it away.
Thanks, Tim. Good job. One thing that was not mentioned at the beginning of the seminar is if you have any questions, type them into that text box on the right side of your screen and we'll try and answer them for you as we go along. With that said, so a little brief history about me. I've worked for public agencies for the last 20, long time, 6 years, I don't remember. 14 years with the city of Santee. Prior to that, I worked 12 years with the city of San Diego. I've been involved with urban forestry for at least the past 16 years. My first supervisory job was with the city of San Diego's urban forestry department. So with that said, enough about me. Let's get to the good stuff. Next slide, please. So with the poll results, I thought they were awesome. That first question showed a lot of people that are new. So I'd like to speak to you guys. Tim talked about inheriting an urban forest, and I'm going to talk about what to do with that urban forest, right? Or if you're starting from the beginning. So tree maintenance work types to prevent risk. So right from the bat, we're going to talk about right tree, right place, and different pruning methods, and what are the benefits of a routine grid trim cycle. So next slide. So right tree, right place, that's like the mantra of the urban forester. You can't stress it enough. If you could wave a magic wand, and build a city from scratch, and you can plant the right trees in the right place, and you would have far less risk mitigation. But that's not the case. You're going to inherit an urban forest. You're going to buy a house. You're going to have a HOA board, and you're going to inherit a bunch of trees. So some of those trees weren't planted in the right place at the right time, right? So what do you do about that? So right tree, right place is so important. I can't even. We'll get into it, but I can't even. I'm speechless about it. Anyway, so what happens if you? What are some considerations of right tree, right place? So it'll help you with. You need to consider future growth, the height, the shape of the tree, the location, overhead spacing, meaning utilities. Is there buildings nearby? You want to put something that matches your climate, right? Watering needs. If you have a xeriscape gardening or succulents, you don't want to put a high water tree in there, obviously, right? You want to promote urban forest diversity. My predecessor here in Santee, she was very good at diversity. She planted a lot of different species of plants. You also want to look at underground considerations like utilities. So right tree, right place. I'm going to jump around a little. I'm sorry. In Santee, we put a moratorium on some trees. We try to recognize biodiversity. So we try not to plant any more crepe myrtles, any more Brisbane boxes, robinias, purple leaf plums. We have too many and they die or they don't do well. There's no biodiversity. So we'll get into that a little bit later. So some pruning methods. Structural prune, that's typically for a new planting. You plant a tree in the parkway or your front yard or your HOA or whatever, you're a tree trimming contractor and you get asked to plant a tree. Typically want to do a structural prune, and that establishes a strong central leader. It'll help alleviate future failure. So it's right there at ground level. super easy to do. Another type of pruning is the crown cleaning. That's the very non-invasive type of trim. It's preferred for bigger mature trees, and what that does is it takes away dead branches, diseased branches, no live foliage is cut. So crown thinning, it's a selective removal of small live branches to reduce crown density. No more than 25% of the foliage should be done. Crown raising, selective removal of branches in order to provide vertical clearance, and that's clearance for pedestrians, which is typically about 7 feet, and vehicles, which is about 14 feet. So here in Santee, we just did a crown raising, cost us about $18,000. Our street sweeper was hitting a lot of our parkway trees or had to go around them. So you'll see cases of where trees haven't been crown raised on major thoroughfares where it looks like a L shape, like box trucks hit it all the time every day, and you have a nice little L shaped. Those trees could use a little crown raising. Crown restoration, selective removal of branches, sprouts, and stubs from trees that have been topped. So that one's a little controversial. If a tree has been topped, crown restoration is very expensive and it's a very lengthy process. It's almost, depending on the value of the tree in the community, you know, is it historical? Are people tying themselves to the tree? You might want to do a crown restoration. If not, you know, you might want to consider removing it because it's going to be a long, lengthy, expensive process. Crown reduction, selective removal of branches and stems to decrease the height and or spread of a tree. You could have a leaning tree. You might want to crossing branches. There's some reasons for crown reduction. Utility pruning, that's kind of obvious. We've all seen the trees that look like they have a little V trim where they're growing sideways and are cut to make room for utility lines. So once again, wrong tree, wrong place. Communities back in the 50s, 60s when they were new and there were overhead lines, and you know, I don't know if they had landscape architects back then, but when they planted those trees, they weren't thinking ahead, thinking that the power lines might be 40 feet off the ground and you're planting a 50-foot tall tree, right? So right tree, right place. I'm going to say that 100 times. You guys will be sick of me talking about it. So next slide, please. So here's an example of a structural prune. It's probably a 36-inch, 24-inch box tree that was planted straight from the nursery, full of branches and stuff. And you know, it might not need a structural prune, but you know, it can't hurt. It's always good. What that'll do is it'll give you a single central leader. You'll have nice branch spacing. You make sure there's strong branch attachments. So anything weak looking, anything you want to direct or shape, or if you see some included bark in there, you want to address it now early. If you do that, you'll have a reduced number of tree failures and you'll lower your long-term costs. You won't have to come out and trim it as often, and the trimming will be quicker and easier when you do trim it. Next slide. So cities, we do what's called a grid trim or routine grid trim cycle. It's the most cost-effective way to trim all your trees. So we have a budget. We try and trim our trees every 3 to 4 years if we can. And if you do a routine grid trim, you know, it'll reduce the need for emergency maintenance. That's because they'll be lightened up a little bit. They won't be so heavy and prone to breakage. You could predetermine or pre-design trimming grids, which are trimmed in their entirety on a set schedule. We'll go into more detail about that. Prevent liability problems such as weak or dead branches. We'll go into that a little bit. And it'll improve the urban forest health and real value over the long term. Next slide. So what are some benefits of a routine, of a grid trim? So as cities, I know there's some city people in here, you get called for scheduling, all right? So you can schedule, we schedule our trims, like I said, every 2, 3 years, 4 years, and we pick neighborhoods and it's on a rotating basis. We do our parks on a rotating basis. So it's a long-term, a grid schedule is set at the beginning of the project, enabling more efficient use of personnel and resources. Improve PR. Citizens could be informed in advance when their trees are scheduled for service. It's a proactive thing. People, I don't know, it seems like nowadays people want to be informed more. So the more information you give people, the better. It's equitable service. We all have the residents in our towns that call all the time for tree trimming. And if you have a schedule and you do grid trims, you eliminate the unequitable service. You can't, it's really expensive to send a tree trimming guy out to trim one tree on a service request as opposed to doing a grid trim. You get far more value. So if you have a schedule and you stick to it, and your citizens will learn and hopefully go along with it, and that's, everybody wins. So when you do that, you do preventative maintenance. So the trees receive routine maintenance and inspections. We're going to go into that a little bit. So preventative maintenance. So this is tree risk, right? So when you do grid trims every 2 or 3 years, you're going to have your tree trimming contractor. Ours happens to be West Coast Arborist, and we have a tree inventory that Tim talked about. On our tree inventory, it tells us all the work history. There's a green dot, you know, it tells you that there's a tree there on your map. A yellow dot means a tree that is maybe in decline, and a red dot is probably a dead tree or something that you really need to look at. So when you do grid trims, there's eyes on these trees every 2-3 years, and they could update that and tell you what trees are at risk. We can't drive around every day looking at trees every day when we got a million other things to do, and we can't assess these trees every day. So we have to rely on our tree trimming contractor to tell us this information. So if they identify a high risk tree, as for tree risk assessment, we need to remove and replace that tree, or if it's a possibility of saving. So every red dot on our map, it's gone. Kind of gotta stay on top of that. So next slide, please. So what are the benefits? Again, whoops, go back one, Liz. There we go. So grid pruning, oh boy. Improves the health of the tree population through routine pruning. So you want to remove the dead wood, correct structure that enhances the appearance. It's a capital asset. A tree is a capital asset, just like a road or a building or a sidewalk. It has value. So you need to figure out the value, and we'll get into that too a little bit. If you do routine grid trims, you'll reduce liability in theory because you have eyes on these trees. They're getting looked at. They're getting their heavyweight branches taken care of and trimmed back a little bit. There's clearance for roadways, cars, pedestrians, so you will reduce your liability. And you'll also have efficient record keeping. So every time they touch a tree, it's documented what they did. There's work history that goes back, 10 years for us, 12 years, that'll tell you every time that tree was trimmed. All right, next slide. So risk management could lead to an improvement in the entire urban forest. So this is a happy circle of tree joy. So if you have better management, if you take care of your trees, you'll have greater urban forest benefits, right? And if you have better benefits, if people are calling and they know their schedule and they're happy, you can leverage funding, meaning you can go to your city councils with your assets and say our trees are worth whatever amount of dollars and we need this much money to trim them and maintain them. And when you do that, you ultimately have risk reduction. So it's just a big endless loop of tree risk mitigation. Next slide. So balancing urban forest health. Santee is in the process of an urban forestry management plan. It's kind of a thing a lot of cities are looking at. In that plan, it'll identify some ordinance things, street tree plans, tree maintenance manuals, things of that nature. Next slide. So for some cities, there's the Joint Powers Insurance Authority that's a guideline and procedures for the maintenance of trees. So it's a little document they have. If you're a city, if you have a risk management department, they might want to read this. I think 3 cities in San Diego currently kind of following their guidelines. It's a good resource to read. Next slide. Return on your investment, growing assets. See, trees are a growing asset, literally. A sidewalk or a road is an asset, but it depreciates in value as it gets full of ruts and potholes and sidewalks crack and lift. A tree will grow and increase in value. So especially when they're properly maintained, right? So part of our urban forestry management plan, part of the state California, part of everything, there's climate action plans, there's greenhouse gas and ecosystem goals. We're gonna look at canopy cover goals, shade goals. There's a whole bunch of stuff to cover. So next slide. So trees pay us back. So this is kind of a rough example. So for example, if Santee planted 100 trees at a cost of $101,000, that $101,000 would include purchasing, planting, pruning, the removal and disposal of any dead ones, doing pest disease mitigation, the water cleanup, sidewalk repair. You know, there's going to be lifted sidewalks, possibly any legal costs. So over 40 years, it's going to cost you $101,000. But over those 40 years, you're going to benefit $261,000. And by benefit, by energy, so everyone knows, like if you plant a deciduous tree on the southern side of your house, you'll save on energy. When the leaves fall off in the fall, you'll have sunshine on your house and maybe it'll lower your heating bill. And in the summer when it's hot, the tree will leaf out and provide shade, which will lower your air conditioning bill, right? These are quantifiable things. The air quality, you're breathing fresh air, stormwater mitigation, all these new projects that are being built are required by the state of California to have bioswales and trees. So that's part of stormwater mitigation, and there is a quantifiable measurement to that. Public health, people go to parks, trees, shade, happy. Everyone likes a tree. Real estate values go up. A nice tree-lined street, if you could imagine that in your mind's eye. Beautiful, right? Those houses are worth more than, were probably worth more than a house in the middle of a busy street with no trees, and it's kind of industrial, right? So it does increase real estate values. That's a known fact. Aesthetics and then biodiversity. So you're not going to get a check. The payoff's $160,000. City's not going to get a check for $160,000, right? But it's quantifiable that there are $160,000 worth of benefits. All right, next slide. So measuring tree value. We have to do this quite a bit as a city. Whether it's a car accident, somebody hitting a tree and we have to replace it, or maybe you have a rogue homeowner that just completely comes out and thinks they're doing the right thing and tops your tree, and it ends up being more cost effective to replace it. So the American Society of Consulting Arborists, the ASCA, they have this guide that stands up in court, and it works, and it puts a dollar value on trees. So we can get restitution back if needed, but more importantly, it puts a dollar value on trees so that you can go to city council and say, hey, our urban forest is worth X amount of dollars and we need this budget because why? And it's based on these values that are given through the ASCA. All right, next slide. So tools for measuring value. So look at that, City of Santee's, all our right-of-way trees, park trees, median trees, it's all city maintained trees. There's no private trees. We have no horse in the race for private trees, right? This is strictly city trees. Our urban forest is valued at $16 million. So if we go to council and say, hey, you have a growing asset that's worth $16 million, and we're going to plant more trees and we need more money, this is how you justify budgets. If you have an HOA, same thing, right? Same thing applies. You can get dollar values for your tree. And remember talking about biodiversity. So I kind of put a moratorium. We put a moratorium on crepe myrtles. We're done with those, and Brisbane boxes. We're not planting those anymore. They're top 3 trees. The other trees that I mentioned don't seem to grow well, the robinias and the purple leaf plums. So I'm trying to get away from those. But here's this is a perfect opportunity for you to see what the value of your urban forest is or your personal private tree or your HOA or whatever. It's a great way to fight for budget. All right, next slide. So when you know the value and you know what budget you need, you could work with city tree boards and residents. A tree board or resident speaking at a city council meeting carries a lot of weight as opposed to some city employees up there asking for more money. It comes across a little better, I guess, if the residents are asking for more money. So once again, more information. Part of the urban forestry management plan will be working with maybe creating a city tree board and working with residents. They're critical during city budget hearings. The board could act as liaisons to understand overall community needs, and it provides opportunities for public review and comment. Maybe there's some trees. We're going to do some case studies real quick. Actually, that's the next slide. Let's go on the next slide. So tree risk and mitigation, right? Here's a private tree. I think it was 3-4 years ago. This is a tragedy. It ended up killing 2 people that were sleeping in that house. So a private tree in San Diego, it was planted between some homes. Some neighbors around it were concerned that the tree was too heavy and could fall. Turns out there was a lot of rain a couple weeks prior to that, and some 25-mile-an-hour winds ended up toppling that tree. So the landowner ultimately who planted it, or not who planted it, but who resides there, they inherited that tree, or maybe they planted that tree, I'm not sure, but they're ultimately responsible for the tree. The damages were mortalities, broken gas lines, down power lines. If you look at that bottom picture, it looks like that root ball was up against that house, and it looks kind of, there's no, like, normally you would see long trailing roots dangling in the air. So I think the roots grew up against that house, against the foundation, and went sideways, kind of went horizontal against the house, it looks like. So not strong root buttresses, right? So I read several articles about this, and the neighbors were saying that it was heavy, never been trimmed, they need to trim it or they need to remove it. And it, you know, some routine trimming every 3-4 years, having an arborist come out and look at it every 3-4 years, you know, 5 years, whatever, might have saved these people's lives. It's a tragedy. That's tree risk at its worst right there. That's you know, something that maybe could have been avoided had the property owner spent some money and trimmed the tree and did some proper risk mitigation with that one. So next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. As a result, you know what? I just jarred my memory. As a result of that Torrey pine falling, we have a few Torrey pines here in Santee. And we did a level 2 risk assessment of a handful of our Torrey pines that were in the center medians. They were big, beautiful Torrey pines. So that triggered a risk assessment, a level 2 risk assessment within our city to check our trees and make sure ours were okay. In case that wasn't a fluke, maybe there was some weird pine bee, who knows what it was, but better to be safe than sorry. So here's an example, case study in Encinitas. I've been invited out by my counterpart to go out there and look at what they did. I haven't forgotten you. So Encinitas, if you're out there, if I kind of messed the story up, I apologize. But they are also going through an urban forestry management plan. And in the upper right picture, there's some big, beautiful ficus trees in their downtown area. And it was my understanding that, please forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think Encinitas wanted to possibly remove those. And there was public outcry. So 50 years ago, those were the tree of the month, flavor of the week, right? Those went, especially up in the LA area, there's a ton of ficus trees. So wrong tree, wrong place. Going back to that again, those trees have very destructive roots and they lift sidewalks. So City Encinitas, I believe, wanted to remove them, and there was public outcry. Because of that public outcry, they found money and they found creative solutions. They ended up developing an urban forest subcommittee. They modified their tree policies as part of their urban forestry management plan, updated their trim cycle, develop protocols for planting, removal, plant health care, and in this case, sidewalk root management. So they removed the sidewalk panels that were trip hazards. That's part of your tree risk mitigation, is eliminating trip hazards. So that's probably the number one. Number two risk mitigation is limbs falling. So trip hazards. They removed the panels and they put metal plates so that they can remove the metal plates and do a little bit of root shaving, and they ended up mitigating the risk. They can do root shaving every couple of years as the roots grow and hit that bottom of that metal plate. They could pull the metal plate, do some root shaving, and put the plate back on, and the tree is good to go, right? No one trips, no one falls. It's a brilliant solution. So next slide. Here's unfortunately another another tragic case. So when I was in San Diego in 2003 or 4, it was my first supervisory job, and they gave me a job in the urban forest. And I didn't know what an urban forest was. I was shoveling asphalt and cleaning ditches, right? That was my first introduction to urban forestry. And I used to laugh like, hey, what's an urban? That's like an oxymoron, right? Like a jumbo shrimp or something. What the heck is an urban forest? That was almost 20 years ago. Well, urban forest is, I get it now. They're beautiful. But we had a budget of $250,000 for broadleaf trimming and $150,000 for palm tree trimming. So this is a case where a palm tree, there was heavy rains for weeks, and there was a queen palm that fell over and landed on this guy's car a few houses down from his house. So he called the city. The city came out and removed the queen palm. It was blocking the roadway on his car, whatever. So they removed the queen palm. 4 hours later, the guy goes out to work, and he walks out on the sidewalk, and another queen palm fell, and it landed on him, and it paralyzed the guy from the waist down. Tragic. God, I can't even imagine. So he sued the city, and he contended that the city was liable because it had slashed the budget that was in place for decades to inspect and maintain trees in public right-of-ways. So the verdict, jury gave that guy $7,600,000. The city, of course, said, well, we're not liable. It's an act of God. Nobody told us that the tree was failing. We had no idea that the tree was failing. So looking back, had they done grid trims? It sounds like the city of San Diego cut their budget. I think they said in court, the lawyer suing said that the city of San Diego cut their budget for palm tree trims. So they saved $800,000. Had they done grid trims, right? Had they put eyes on that palm tree every 2 years or 1 year, 3 years, whatever the budget allowed, they might have prevented this. They might have prevented it from happening. Queen palms, they lose roots at the base sometimes. They flare out, and they kind of have a little bit of those little spaghetti roots just growing straight into the ground. They should kind of flare out and be a nice solid attachment with the ground. But weed whackers and soil erosion, those roots won't grow, and you'll have a little ball of roots. And the tree trimmer might have identified that. They might have made that dot a yellow, right? Or that dot of red on the map. And San Diego would have known, like, hey, this is a high-risk tree. We need to really look at it. But because they cut the budget, they saved $800,000, but they paid $7 million. So fight for your budgets, do your tree inspections, do your grid trims, put eyes on trees. And if you see stuff, then you look back at Tim's materials, and start identifying what the problems are. So next slide, please. Survey. So based on what you just learned, A, I will join a local urban forestry group to assist with advocacy. I will continue to monitor trees and advocate for them. C, I will present this info to my boss and see what he can do. D, I'll do what I can, but doubt anything will change. Let's see what you have to say. How'd I do, boss man?
Fantastic. Perfect.
Not boring?
Not at all. My answer is C, by the way. I'm going to ask you for more money.
All right. Oh, brilliant. All right. I don't know if you guys heard my coworker there. He's going to ask me for more money. So good stuff. Interesting answers. I'm really happy that the majority of you picked B. That's awesome. So thank you. Next slide. So with that, I think we're done. Mikey?
Yeah, good job, Sammy. Good job, Tim. Yeah, a lot of good information there. We actually do have some questions for you guys. So Tim, if you want to turn your camera back on, and I'll go through. We got 5 questions that were posed here. I'll wait for Tim to pop back up. There you go. Okay. All right. So question number 1, how much weight do you typically give to an observed pattern of failures on a tree? That may be more of a Tim question, but.
Sure, I'll start first. I personally tend to give a lot of weight to that. The reason being because on the tree risk assessment form, on the front page, you've got 2 locations where it's asking you for previous failure information. So one would be the site factors. It asks for a history of failures if you know it. It's asking you to look around that location for failures. And also under the crown and branches, it's asking you for previous branch failures. If you see it, check that off and write down some notes about that too. So there's 2 locations where you're looking for previous failures. So that tells me that it's pretty important. But Sam, you can chime in if you want.
Can you repeat that one more time, Mikey?
Yeah, how much weight do you typically give an observed pattern of failures on a tree? So a tree that has multiple failures, it's got a pattern of it. How much weight would you give that in a decision in regards to mitigation action?
I give it a ton of weight. It's very important. If you have many risks in the same tree, then you got to ask yourself, why do you have that tree still there? Maybe, we have some iron barks that lose branches, and now you have to look at the tree as a whole and see if it's balanced, see if it's right, and you might lose more than 2/3 of the trunk from a large limb failure. So any past things, all that weighs in, and it makes you have a better decision in the end. For absolutely, man, that stuff's important.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. Our next question, should all trees that have previously been topped be removed to adequately remove the risk?
You go first, Tim.
Sure, I'll go first. The word all, I would say no, not all. I mean, there's definitely some techniques that you can do to reduce the risk of failure on previously topped trees. And it really requires a lot of expertise and experience in dealing with those kind of trees. Sam, you can comment too.
I think you hit the nail on the head. A top tree is a risky tree to me, unless you do proper crown restoration. That's why we talked about it. Removing them all, that's a judgment call on your part, whoever posed the question. If you have time and money to do a crown restoration, and there's severity of topping, right? If they cut those branches way back down to the trunk, then maybe an arborist will tell you it's not worth saving. If they top them with a lot of meat still on those branches up in the air, it might be a better candidate for a crown restoration. It just depends case by case basis on those trees. There's no right or wrong answer on that.
All right, awesome. Question, Sam, can you say what your annual budget is for Santee?
Our tree trimming budget is about $180,000 this year, I believe. Oh no, it's over 200. I'm sorry, we upped it. It's I think it's about 210,000.
All right, thank you. There's a point of clarification here regarding one of the slides. Oops, I just closed that. Where'd it go? Shoot, hold on. Hold on, what did I do? I did something wrong here. 1 second. What did I do? I closed the questions. You got the next question? Okay, let me see if I can find it. Sorry, guys. It went away on me for a second.
Yeah, so the next question, just to share with everyone, is the Guide for Plant Appraisal is not an ASDA publication. It is an ISA
Hold on.
authored by the Council for Tree and Landscape Appraisals.
This point needs to be made very clear.
I'll repeat that. Okay, the guide for plant appraisal is not an ASCA publication, it's an ISA publication, just a point of clarification. So I guess it's just a little misstatement on that. And then, what was there, one more question?
First case study one. First case.
The first case study, the person who gave the answer was intimately involved with this tree and knows that it was thinned and maintained, and that the, what was it, the roots? Yeah, the failure of that tree was due to lack of root support. That's why that tree failed. So a little bit of inside knowledge on that big Tory pine tree that failed. So we're a little bit beyond the original scheduled time here. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and take a 15-minute break. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Tim. Please come back at 12:30, and we're going to jump into these other items of discussion. And yeah, again, thank you guys. Really appreciate your expertise and your time. And we'll chat here at, come on back at 12:30. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, 12:30. I'm sure everybody scarfed their food and all that good stuff, but going to jump back into it here. We've got a few updates. I think our intentions are to, we should be able to have everybody on mute. That's another question, Liz, for those that are going to speak up. So there will be some liberties. We'll make, hopefully you guys can turn your cameras on when I call your name. So you might want to look for that on your browser there and unmute yourself as we go through the list of people that are here to give updates. So I'll start with Regional Forest Council. We had an executive committee meeting right before this meeting covering a few items. But just to rehash, we, in the month of December, since this is our first meeting of the year, somebody's unmuted. During the month of December, we did our awards program. So Regional Forest Council does recognize individuals and agencies for a variety of things. So this year's winners, we had some really good ones. San Diego State got an award for the best plant healthcare program for the year 2020. City of Del Mar got an award for the best urban forest project. And that was for some downtown enhancements that they did that were pretty cool. And San Diego State's doing stuff innovative for treating for the South American palm weevil on their campus, which is why they got their award. And then the Girl Scouts got an award for an urban forest education badge. So it's the best educational program for the San Diego Girl Scouts. So that's what their award was for. And then last but not least, our own Liz Velarde was the San Diego Regional Urban Forest Council Representative of the Year for 2020, based on all her contributions, including her controlling this PowerPoint today. So she's on mouse control duty today. So yeah, that was exciting. Just to summarize 2020, and then moving into this year, we've got some new people on the executive committee, so which is exciting. Some new blood, and we're grateful for that. We had, obviously today's presentation was one of them. We meet every other month. So our next meeting is going to be April 7th. And I think in our executive committee, we discussed the idea of talking about some of the current pest issues. So we might be having a panel of presenters discussing some of the current things that are happening with all the pest problems we're seeing in the urban forests here in San Diego. So that's on the radar again, April 7th, if you want to mark your calendars for that. It'll be webinar based. I don't think we're going to be out of the woods on COVID just yet. So if you want to look out for that, we'll be promoting that here in the next month or so. We do get money every year from the U.S. Forest Service. We get about $2,000 that is administered by California Urban Forest Council for us to use for projects that are in line with our mission. Can't cover food or drink or anything like that, but we do try and do innovative things with it. Our remaining balance is about $1,500, and we discussed some ideas of how to use those funds for a few projects. So we'll see how that goes. Other stuff, a little bit of workforce development things. I know Ann Fegge's a big advocate in helping that, is transitioning, looking for people to get into this industry, and some of the challenges we're facing as the labor challenges of the world these days. So that's basically in a nutshell kind of what we covered, and some of it's planning, some of it's just getting caught up, and we're doing that on a monthly basis. We have committees and just trying to move this Regional Forest Council in the right direction. And again, the essence of it is we want to be a supporting role in the region for urban forest issues, and obviously trying to educate those that manage tree populations and on all facets. So that's kind of the essence of that. So with that, I'm going to move into asking Megan Shaw. Megan, if you could find your camera and find your microphone and see if this works. See if you could give an update on California Urban Forest Council, if that's possible.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
I'm not sure how to make my camera work. I'm not seeing an option for that, but I will give you, at least you can hear me, I guess. So I will give you an update. So the California Urban Forest Council is doing a lot with basically our bylaws and kind of discussing our plan of action basically for the next year or so. And so we're talking a lot about the strategic plan and basically different like outbreak groups that we can work on different specific things. So outreach to different organizations that we normally wouldn't reach out to, different community groups that normally don't get involved with urban forestry. We're talking a lot about racism, and we just had opportunity to attend a free racism seminar because that's something that's like a really hot topic right now. We are working, or we're actually in the process of doing board elections. And so couple new board members will be joining the board, and that's really for the permanent positions, or not the permanent, the non-regional positions on the California Urban Forest Board. And yeah, talking a lot about the budget. So just a lot of kind of strategic planning and getting ready for this next year. Yeah.
Cool. And just to restate that this program that was presented today comes from a grant that California Urban Forest Council received from CAL FIRE. So, you know, they're doing a lot of stuff. I know that there's a grant coming up called Amplify the Urban Forest that is going to plant trees in 2022, I believe, March of 2022, to plant 2,000 trees in one day up and down the state of California. A lot of cool partnerships involved in that one, including our local Taylor Guitar is going to help, hence the Amplify the Urban Forest, kind of catchy name. But they're going to help provide some level of marketing and involvement. And then we also there's an app that's going to be developed for youth education out of that grant, which is kind of cool, to try and engage you know, the elementary age kids in learning more about the benefits and the gifts of trees. So that's kind of cool. That's in infancy mode, but I know that that's something that I know Nancy at California Urban Forest Council is pretty heavily involved in. So I figured I'd throw those out there. So, but cool. Well, thank you, Megan. I appreciate you being here and representing us. And Megan, just to give a little background, Megan sits on the board for California Urban Forest Council as a representative of the Regional Urban Forest Council. You know, she, you know, kind of helps carry the messaging and what the region needs to the California Urban Forest Council, and then Nancy can advocate on a statewide level for what we need regionally. So thank you, Megan, for filling that role. We appreciate it.
Of course.
Okay, cool. All right. So with that, I will move down to the next update, which is Jennifer Alger. Are you out there, Jennifer? There you go. Look, technology works. I like it when it works. So I asked Jennifer to be here. Jennifer's a huge advocate involved in the movement of the urban wood movement, if you will. So I asked her to give a little bit of an update on the Urban Salvage Reclaim Woods program and what's happening around that world. So if you can give us a little update, Jennifer, appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. I wanted to kind of give an idea. I assume there are those on the call that have no idea what that even is. And as Sam had mentioned, we look to our urban forest or our urban trees as assets. And part of California Urban Forest Council's role in that is to increase the concept that our urban trees, or the reality that our urban trees are indeed just that, an asset. And that's really catching on, and I think most people in our society love our urban trees. But the same is not true when those urban trees come to the end of their natural life, when they need to be removed for some other circumstance, failure, etc. And what the Urban Wood Network does is we help bring into the forefront and bring into society the concept that our urban trees have value even when they have had to be removed or failed for some reason. And that value only exists if we convert those into their next highest and best use. And one of those uses is urban lumber. So a lot of the trees that Sam and Tim were showing throughout this that were failing were a pretty good sized diameter, and those could go into urban lumber. And when that happens, a lot of those benefits, those asset benefits that were in his chart, some of those benefits can continue in the health benefits or the environmental benefits and the aesthetic benefits, because they're sequestering carbon and they're beautiful. So there's some other things there. So what the Urban Wood Network is some 20 years ago, I, in my urban wood business, realized that most people don't even think of our urban trees as having any value when they come to the end of their life. And so I started talking to Eric Oldar of CAL FIRE, and I think it was almost 20 years ago, we did our first urban wood seminar down in Riverside at a CAL FIRE facility. That's where I met West Coast Arborists, and met them down there. And we had hired with Woodmiser, we had hired Sam Sherrill, author of Harvesting Urban Timber, to come and speak and promote this concept. So we loosely networked for the next several decades. And along the way, met Nancy Hughes of California Urban Forest Council. And in 2016, we realized that this network, to deal with the trees as an asset after they come to the end of their life, needs a formal network. So we formed a 501c3 called Urban Salvage and Reclaimed Woods, Inc., and began taking on members and working with cities, municipalities, tree owners to get them to value these trees and ensure that they get a second life. And one of the things that since that we're working on with Mike, thank you, is to get these tree managers to sign a written policy to give these urban trees to ensure that these urban trees have their highest and best use. And then we also work with sawyers who will convert them to lumber, to makers who will make them into something beautiful, or manufacturers such as guitars, making urban guitars. And so all through all of the different stakeholders in urban wood, all the way to the consumer, we're networking into this network. Well, in 2019, so that was Urban Salvage and Reclaimed Woods, Inc. In 2019, we realized there's all these great networks across the nation, and we're fragmented. We have different definitions even for what urban wood is. And so we decided that nationwide, to give the best energy and our best foot forward for our urban trees, is to come together under one brand, one logo, one label, and that is the Urban Wood Network. So that's what the Urban Wood Network is. In the midst of that, we're working on standards. You guys have best management practices, business practices, and just general standards for how to work within, tree removal or tree care. And once the tree comes out, there have not been those standards. And so we have written those standards. So the wood products that will be certified through these standards will be USRW certified woods that work within the Urban Wood Network. And so we're just continuing to get people to realize, if you're managing trees, we're asking that you have a written policy to give that tree its highest and best use when it needs removed. If you're a sawyer, follow these best management practices, become a member of the Urban Wood Network. And if you're an architect or designer, start looking to, urban woods and buy those. And if you're just if you just have one tree in your front yard, work with an arborist or a tree service who will give it its next best life, and ensure that it's carried on. And then you're able to have this great backstory, tell the story of, hey, this didn't come from a traditional forest. This was literally rescued from the waste stream. So that's what the Urban Wood Network is, and that is what we are working on.
Pretty awesome. And yeah, it's been a lot of movement in my career and what I've seen this initiative moving forward. And I know you've been playing a huge role in it, Jennifer, and I thank you for that. I know there's a lot of people who thank you for your energy towards moving the needle on this issue. So, but yeah, the policy she mentioned, there is a policy that CAL FIRE has basically endorsed. Got three main elements to it, basically agreeing to plant trees that have considerations of end of use life, agreeing that you know, when trees are cut down and the wood makes sense to go into the stream for urban wood, then that would get salvaged and you know, reutilized. And then the other piece is how to generate money to keep this cyclical program happening, is that any new construction activity that takes place, 1% of the overall cost of the project would be dedicated to the use of urban wood. That last piece is a little bit of a hurdle we're seeing with the politics of the world. They don't want to put on another burden on developers and things like that. So we're still fine tuning the financial side of driving this, but that is basically the policy in a nutshell, that we're working with multiple cities right now to get that adopted. So, but thank you, Jennifer, for your leadership on it. We appreciate it.
You're very welcome. And I'm not trying to jump off, but I do have another call. So I'll probably get the next person, then I'll jump off. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. All right, with that, I am going to move down to an update from Tree San Diego. Am I getting this right? Yeah. Kirk, are you there?
Yes, I am. And of course, it should be spelled Kurt with a T, but that's a minor. Can you hear me?
That doesn't
Yeah,
sound right.
it's Kurt, not. But anyway,
not
yeah.
Kurt.
Tree San
Kurt.
Diego update. Well, Tree San Diego's got a lot of stuff going on right now. We're in the process of assisting Urban Corps with their 2,000 tree grant. I am the project arborist of record for that. And they're about 85% of the way through planting their 2,000 trees. They're finishing up currently in open space in Rancho Santa Fe with some habitat restoration trees. And then the last piece of that will be moving to the city of La Mesa to work with the Mesa on their project and Urban Corps in getting 350 trees in the ground in the city of La Mesa. We've hit a couple of snags here and there about sites and other things, but we're moving forward. And our biggest grant that we received last year, the Branch Out San Diego grant, is now moving forward. We're finalizing our tree palette, and the grant is kind of unique for those of you who don't know about it. It's the first one we've ever gotten to be able to put trees on private property. And we're going to be partnering with two tribal land groups here, the San Pasqual and the Verona brand of the QMI, to put in what's now going to be a total of 725 trees on those lands. And this project's a little different because we don't have a planting component. We are acquiring the trees and educating and reaching out with our tree steward program. We just did a training the other day with our Tree San Diego interns and some people from Mundo Gardens who are going to be assisting in the outreach for the tribal lands to get those, hopefully here in the next month or two, those 725 trees in the hands of the residents there and get them trained to properly plant the trees. And we have just finally gotten the last piece of another project that we have been waiting and working on with the city of San Diego, where West Coast Arborists put 300 trees in South Bay, and Tree San Diego will be taking on the watering of the project, taking it over from West Coast Arborists, hopefully here in the next 4 to 6 weeks. But we planned to do this with volunteers, but with COVID, we're going to have to rethink our strategy and probably just actually pay a couple of people for probably the first year to get the trees watered because of the onus of COVID and the fact that it's getting more virulent. We just can't really, in good conscience, ask a bunch of volunteers to come out. So interesting little hurdles and headaches we hit, but it's all a good learning experience for everybody. And our tree rejuvenation project, speaking of urban wood, we're looking for, of course, a new home for the mill and even the biochar. That is got some traction. I don't know exactly where it is. Chuck, my colleague, would have a little more info on that, but we're planning to relocate and hopefully potentially down to a site here in South Bay. We'll see if that goes through. But that project is still alive and still moving forward. And then the other project we have that's related through Tree San Diego is the lumber cycle project, which will seek to plant 180 trees in National City as part of, it's also a component, it has an urban wood component, and Tom Hamilton of Lumber Cycle is getting wood diverted for use in a lot of urban wood projects around the city of San Diego. They have a partnership with the Stein Farm, as a matter of fact, to provide some lumber for a house that they have moved and relocated to the Stein Farm, which is a nonprofit in National City. And the other thing Tree San Diego did was recently revive our membership program of Terrific Trees. There are different membership levels where people can contribute to Tree San Diego. It comes with some caveats and some opportunities to, meet with the arborists and perhaps in the future participate in tree planting events. But that will all depend, of course, on the status of COVID. So a lot of stuff going on and a lot of arms moving around, and sometimes it's hard to keep track of what everybody's doing, but we're all busy, COVID notwithstanding. We've all got lots of things to do here. So feel pretty grateful and very optimistic and excited for all the new things that we're getting into.
Okay, we really appreciate your energy on it, and yeah, a lot of spinning plates there, and yeah, I guess stay tuned with Tree San Diego. Just for those of you that have never heard of Tree San Diego, it's the local nonprofit based in San Diego. It's, I don't know, probably about 6-7 years old at this point, but doing awesome stuff, and yeah, a lot of, like Kurt said, a lot of awesome projects coming down the pipeline to move urban forestry in good direction. So cool, thank you, Kurt, appreciate it, buddy.
No problem, Mike.
Okay. All right. Our next update, I'd like to have Lynette Short from CAL FIRE. If you want to turn on your mic, I don't know if you have a camera, but are you there, Lynette? Oh, you got to unmute yourself. It sounds like you're muted. Nope. Sounds a little scrambled. You sound a little scrambled. Maybe I'll do. Let me jump to Urban Core. We'll come back to you, Lynette, and let's see if we can figure out your issues there. Let's jump to. We'll come back to CAL FIRE here in a minute. Let's go to Urban Core. Lauren, are you on the call here? Hi, Lauren. How are you? Oh, you're muted.
There you go. I was trying to point to tell you that somebody else had to do it, but
Oh, okay.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, we have a few things I was going to update on that CAL FIRE grant as well. So thanks, Kurt, with a T, for doing that as well. Tree San Diego has been a great partner in that grant. We are very excited that we are 75–80%, through the planting, and can then work to long-term water and maintenance through the rest of the grant period. I did want to give an update too, just on Urban Core in general, just with crews, COVID, crews are still working. We're just taking a lot of safety precautions in the morning, masked smaller crews, smaller cars or bigger cars with less people in them so they can sit further apart. And then everyone's not in school in person, they're in school virtually. So that's taken, I think the biggest challenge with COVID has been that adjustment. And then to your point earlier about urban forestry jobs and such, we have been working with Ann, and American Forest is looking at a grant that was received up in Northern California that is looking for opportunities. So we're just still working through the kinks of how we can take the idea of working with Urban Core for urban forestry jobs and kind of connect the dots. And then lastly, Mike, when you talked about a new board member, that one of your new board members is from Urban Core, is Nally, our urban forester at Urban Core, who I think is taking notes right now. So we're happy to be a part of the team.
Yeah, no, grateful to have Nally on here. She's an awesome resource and did a good job with the minutes. She took minutes for our January meeting, so she did a good job. So thank you for that. She had Nally mentioned you have a graduation coming up. What's the graduation all about?
Well, we graduate students twice a year. This graduation is going to look different. Of course, the last few have looked different because normally we in person at our campus in Old Town pack out 300 people in our community room for graduation. Of course, we can't do that. The last one was this one will be virtual, just like the last one was virtual. And so that link can absolutely be shared with anyone interested. It'll be through YouTube Live. And we normally have about 40 to 50 graduates. We have 10. Again, COVID has has challenged the ability for some students to do school at home and not have that one-on-one contact they would in the classroom. So some students are going to have to wait a little longer to graduate, but they'll get there, and we're figuring it out. But yeah, so it's a graduation of our students who have completed their high school diploma, are graduating from Urban Corps, and then can go to work at places like with Mike, maybe, when they graduate.
Yeah, you know, we had a brief discussion in our executive meeting regarding the initiative for the hiring. I feel like I'm a little bit of a pulse on the statistics for you guys, at least for the tree stuff. I have, and I'd say over the last year, we maybe got 5 applicants. And how many people graduated from you last year?
100, I think, on the dot.
100, yeah. So we got to figure out a way to get that 95. We got to attract them better to this industry. Not, you know, it's not just for me, but really the end of the day, this industry needs a good, effective labor force, and you guys are right in line with that. We just got to somehow be more attractive than what we currently are. What's the competition for us? You know, where do all those 95 kids go, or not kids, but adults?
Yeah.
Where do they go? You know.
That might be a great future San Diego Regional Urban Forestry discussion during a meeting as well with members of the community. But yeah, you're right, and that's part of what we've been talking about with Ann, is how do you, either it's not attractive, or Urban Corps just needs the right connections, you know, to make it attractive. So yeah, we definitely need to close that gap for sure.
Okay, well, I appreciate your continued work on it, and appreciate Nylali's contributions to the Regional Forest Council, and just look forward to seeing you guys keep rocking the way you guys do. So,
Thanks, Mike.
thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, you got it. All right, Lynette, can we try you again? Let's see, you got a signal? Maybe? Wonder if I got a message from you. So Lynette, if you guys don't know who she is, she's trying to dial in. She's the CAL FIRE urban forester for our region. And I think one of the updates she would potentially give is what's the current status on the grants programs. A lot of, you know, the success of urban forest. There we go, Lynette.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, you're a little staticky, but I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I need to use it. So
It's really staticky. Yeah, I don't think it's gonna work. If you want to text me some stuff real quick, maybe I can rattle that off. Maybe do that. But in the meantime, let's go to Ann Faggy. Ann, if you want to give an update on the Kate Sessions program, if you want to turn on your camera on your mic. Are you there? So Ann Faggy, if you don't know who she is, oh, there she is. There we go. Can you you might be muted. Yeah, you're muted. Nope.
Lynette, call into your cell phone on a speakerphone. That will, that sometimes works.
Go ahead and give us an update while I got that going.
I will. So there's a group of us leading something called Kate Sessions Commitment. And it's really a movement. We're not trying to start an organization. We're not looking for $1 million grant. We're trying to help provide the expertise for organizations to get and grow trees. So that features canopy, community, and climate action. The best place, we're not sharing screens, but the best place to find it, very simple web name. It's called katestrees.org. No dashes, no anything, just Kate's, no apostrophe, katestrees.org. And there's quite a bit. It's meant to be a person who wants trees, but has never thought about all the pieces. And we've tried to simplify it as much as possible. We have 3 key pieces to it. Number one is we're focused on getting trees planted in areas that are low on trees and underserved neighborhoods. So we're working with interfaith groups, NAACP, Promise Zone, equity group in the city. Lauren has introduced us. Lauren Welch has introduced it to some folks. So basically saying, you know, we'll help you get or grow a tree and in places that you want it for your mission. So we actually the urban forest our organization right here donated 10 trees, and they went into the Martin Luther King celebration of 2 weeks ago. In addition, that celebration raised $800 of their members to purchase trees, and that'll go 100% to purchase, which is going to be from Walter Anderson, and they cost between 25 and 50 bucks. The second program is that we have these smaller trees, 5-gallon trees. We made arrangements with wholesale nurseries at Village Nurseries and Native West to get 5-gallon trees, and then we've done some inspections along the way. We want to just make sure that we're planting healthy trees, and so I think we're good with the 5-gallon because it's really not at the end of their selling cycle. So they're 5 gallons. If they don't sell these that we've reserved, they'll move them on, and so we're thinking we're not going to have the issues with the root bound pots. So that second one is anybody can buy a tree at Walter Anderson or Mission Hills, and then we're featuring city farmers at for fruit purchases. And by the way, the owner passed this week, Bill Tall. I didn't have the pleasure of knowing him, but just it's a legend for all of us.
Yeah, he was a good guy.
Yeah, well, he lived what he believed in, right?
Yep.
And the third part is just being advocates for trees, and that might be in climate action, it might be in budget hearings, it might be in helping organizations see that the trees are part of the investments that we make in our community. It's about the spirit of trees. It's really not about trying to build a big organization, but it's getting the spirit into other people's organizations and the stewardship. So that's what we're doing. So please join us. Some of you have this email message from me, but I also have another email message. It's called Anne, @catestrees.org. And so, help us build this. It's not going to be very big in any one organization, but it's basically bringing trees into community base. Not only in the forestry community. So it's it's a resource that others are welcome to join us on or invite us in or give a presentation or whatever. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, and I appreciate your energy on it. I know it's a lot to do, but we appreciate it, and so the urban forest will thrive hopefully in the future from it. So
hopefully. Thanks.
Hopefully. All right. Thank you, Ann. All right. So I do have Lynette. I'm gonna put Lynette on speaker here, and let's see. All right, Lynette, can you hear me?
Yeah, give me a sec, because I gotta undo the all levels here so I don't hear 3 echoes.
Okay. All right. So again, just a reintroduction.
All right.
Lynette's
Sorry about that, you guys. I'm working in a different office today on a different machine that does not have a webcam, and I don't usually use GoToWebinar, so maybe some of that's my deal, but I don't have a very extensive update, and so sorry to disappoint. I know it's been a long time since everybody's heard my voice. Basically, we've been CAL FIRE and the Urban Forest Program. We've been working with the shifts and changes of COVID. We'll just say that it's had a pretty big impact on the day-to-day, additional operations, CAL FIRE as a whole. Definitely in the San Diego unit, where we're participating big time in, we have in contact tracing, testing, and now vaccinating and everything. So me not directly involved in that stuff, but it always has an indirect effect in some way when we take on additional responsibilities, kind of like fire season has that trickle down effect. So anyways, on the urban forestry side of things, I mean, we generally saw slow in progress with our grantees, and that was to be expected. There's a lot of municipalities, a lot of local governments who, have the same kind of effect, had to sit and, think, mobilize for a minute how they were going to continue on operations as best as they could. So I venture to say all the urban foresters around the state, we've been trying to just be there to support. Still try and push our grantees to meet their goals somewhat, because although, at the beginning of let's say just a project, 3 years sounds like a long period of time, but usually people are taking on a lot more than they bargained for once they get underway into a project, and that's just kind of that's the nature of urban forestry and how it goes. Ever changing climate, and so what you guys did see is we were not able to release a grant program last year. Our CCI funds were, for lack of a better term, were somewhat frozen. We did not get an allocation into the urban forestry program last year. Trickle down effect of COVID, but the good news is that that's turning around, and it's turning around actually pretty quickly. So the latest and greatest I have, and this is just news as of yesterday, is right now there is currently right now $10 million in the governor's budget. It's not signed off, but it's in the governor's budget, and that is for this fiscal year. So we could potentially see, as soon as it's approved and you have signature on this, we could potentially see a release of our grant program before the end of this fiscal year, which is not natural for us. We're usually waiting for the next fiscal year's budget to be approved and move on, and we'll release our new grant guidelines, around the fall month. But it is possible that we may be releasing our grant program before the end of this next fiscal year. So I'm saying as early as March or April of this year. And if that does happen, it's going to be somewhere in the realm of $10 million. And in addition to that, what's next on the governor's budget is a potential $13 million for next fiscal year. So in this complete calendar year, to 2021, you may see somewhere around $23 million coming back out of urban forestry, California Urban Forestry's grant program. So what that looks like for people on the receiving end is we would only advertise the grant program once. We're not going to do 2 different rounds in 1 year. It's just administratively, that's way too much for us to take on. So if we get the approval and the sign off on the $10 million for this fiscal year, we start that immediately, release the new guidelines and get going on that. And then once the governor signs the budget for next fiscal year, and if whatever we do receive, and these are all via CCI funds, California Climate Investment, we will just augment the current program that we had released. So it's going to be a little bit of finagling time-wise. We probably won't finalize that first round of grant funds. We just kind of want to wait and see if we get the augmented funding or the second round of funding. So anyways, in the big picture of things, for anybody who's not really familiar with what we have been doing for the last 2, 3, 4 years with California Climate Investment, we're getting back up to par as to where we used to be. So the Urban Forest Program has been able to put out somewhere around $20 million each year for our grant program. So that's getting us back up, and we do still hope to grow the program and have additional funding in future years. It's just obviously 2020 was a pretty uncertain year for everybody. So that's good. We're getting back up. Our grant program likely to look very similar to the previous 2-3 years as well. Guidelines are going to look really similar as usual, just some minor changes. So if you're unfamiliar, you're more than welcome to get on our, not just the California Urban Forestry page, but we have a separate grants page. And what you see out there as far as our 1920 grant program is going to look really similar to what we're going to put out here in the future. So the guidelines, the list of programs should all be there still on our website, so you can go check that out. So that's kind of our grant program update, which is, largely our focus, or my day-to-day focus. One little update programmatically for us is we have a new position within our urban forestry program. We have a new Forester 2 urban forest supervisor for the southern region. So basically I have a new supervisor. Our Inland Empire Urban Forester has a new supervisor, and our LA County Urban Forester. So he's supervising the three of us in the South, and he's going to be able to kind of share some of the responsibilities regionally instead of us being spread so thin. Hopefully, so we can focus a little bit more just on our individual areas. But his name is Jimmy Scheid. If you've never heard his name before, he was a regional urban forester up in the north. And so now he's part of our South team, and so you'll probably be seeing and hearing his name at least slightly. It's his goal to make it to each of our working groups and regional councils at one point over the next year. So it's a new position, so he's still working out details with the program manager as to how exactly this is all going to shake out. In a nutshell, it's good. It's spreading out our workload a little bit, and us personally as a regional force, we're able to get a little bit closer support for our day-to-day jobs. So in addition to that, in the next month or two at the most, we are finally filling behind an empty spot. We have not had a program manager sitting in the state urban forester spot. I mean, it's been filled with Sean Melvin, but he also has a multitude of other programs that he's been managing. So they are working on, they just went through the interview process. It sounds like they have some really good candidates, and we will have somebody filling those shoes. So it's another way that we're going to be supported a little bit better programmatically day to day. When we have these vacant positions, those responsibilities fall heavily on John and then some of them on ourselves. And if you're not familiar with the hierarchy of how rank goes within an organization like CAL FIRE, it can be difficult at times if you're not of a certain level getting, just basic support for administratively. So it's all good. We're looking at growing the program in the next 5 years or so with additional personnel. We've always been, trying to work on that, but these things are getting a little bit closer. So just getting a program manager position filled, a supervisor here in the South is a really good sign that we're getting the support from above to continue to increase our program. And, it translates into more capacity for us. For putting out grants or having better, support for your local non-GOs or local government grant program, whatever. Anyhow, that was probably a little bit more than I intended. Does anybody have any questions?
I have one. So this new round of grants, is there still going to be the requirement that the projects take place in disadvantaged communities?
It's a real good question, Mike. Thank you for bringing that up. We're going to have the emphasis on disadvantaged communities, hopefully a little bit of flexibility. The disadvantaged community focus will never go away with California climate investments as far as urban forestry being involved, because we have the opportunity. However, over the last 4 or 5 years or so, we have been able to touch those communities pretty well. There's still some communities that could utilize some assistance, but if they're not reaching out to us or, then there's not much we can do. So we have the ability to spread our funds into non-disadvantaged communities, low-income communities, or adjacent to. So that focus will always be there, but I think as we continue to spend the previous funds in the disadvantaged communities, we're going to be able to spread our wings out a little bit outside of those communities. So yeah, I'm sorry, not a real straightforward answer, but hopefully that helps a little bit.
Okay. And for those of you that don't know what the disadvantaged community is, there's a website, EnviroScreen. It's still 3.0, right, Lynette? EnviroScreen. So you Google search and Cal EnviroScreen 3.0, and it'll pull up a map, and it's really based on socioeconomic, air quality, public health, all sorts of stuff. It zeroes in on areas that are of higher need. And so really there's preference given to areas that are of higher need, basically, in a nutshell. So that's what that's all about. But
You can find that information, Cal Fire Screen 3.0 and any other low-income disadvantaged community maps or resources within the Cal Fire Urban Forestry Grant Guidelines. It's a large document, but the table of contents is pretty accurate and detailed. So it'll lead you to ARB's page, the EPA that plays a part in how they put together disadvantaged communities, but it's all within our grant guidelines on our Cal Fire Urban Forestry grant page.
Awesome. Does anybody have any questions for Lynette? I like to say is you could turn on your mic. I don't know what that's gonna. Or raise your hand. Raise your hand if you have a question, and perhaps we can turn on your mic for you. We'll give that a second here, see if anybody has any questions for Lynette from Cal Fire. Doesn't look like it. Not seeing any hands raised yet, but Lynette, thank you. We appreciate you you being here, and maybe someday we'll see you in person.
You should have today. I think I told you I had a last minute meeting, but I had to attend instead of this one. That was reprioritized for myself.
I get it. I get it. Okay. Yeah, I do. There was some questions put in the text box here, and they're kind of related to grants, so I'll kind of read them aloud here. How does an agency play a role in the amplifying the urban forest grant? So that's still agencies are being selected for that. You can reach out to probably Nancy Hughes to find out more information on that one. From California Urban Forest Council, if you want to participate. And then the other question is, does the Urban Wood Network have a website? Yes, I believe it does. That's usrw.com, I believe, is where you find that. That's Jennifer Alger's program with the Urban Wood. Those were two questions that were put in the text here. So answered those. But Lynette, let me just wrap you up, and thank you for your time. And if there's no other questions for Lynette, I'll go ahead and hang up on you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll make sure to. I'm almost positive I'm going to be able to be at the next meeting.
Okay, sounds good. All right, I'm going to say bye to you, Lynette. Thank you.
See ya. Thank you.
See ya. Bye. Okay, so we have about 12 minutes or so. We're on schedule here. We kind of left the last portion of the meeting open to updates from regional attendees, a chance to, what are you guys up to? Anything you want to share? I could pick on people. I see names that I know and I could call you out, but if anybody wants to raise your hand and kind of share a little bit about what's happening with your urban forests or what you're up to? Anybody before I call on somebody? All right, let's see. I'll start with, I'm going to call out Mike Hogan. I saw Mike Hogan's on there. Mike, you there? Mike Hogan.
I knew it. I knew it.
Hey, you ask questions, that's what you get.
I knew it. That's all right.
Yeah, so Mike, can you tell us a little about what's happening with your world? And who's Mike Hogan, and what are you up to with urban forestry?
Who was that? So no, I got a badge of honor the other day in a pre-con meeting. I'm here at UCSD, that's UC San Diego, and the urban forester. But I was called out as a tree hugger in the pre-con meeting. I said, "Damn right." Damn
Nice.
right. Yeah,
Nice.
it was good. It was good. That was good. But they were ready and they listened. But that's the thrust of what's going on here is just a ton of construction. I mean, in the billions of dollars worth. And so you can imagine the campus that's no bigger than a very small city with billions of dollars of construction. There's going to be tree impacts. And I'm trying a lot of things, getting some traction on some things, not getting some traction on others. But we're trying. Even though I'm the urban forester, I actually only play a small role in how our urban forest is affected, as for the sheer fact that I also supervise 2 other crews that are non-related to trees and just related to general landscape maintenance. I got quite a few people that I supervise, so I'm spread pretty thin. So, but beyond that, we also have a planning department and a capital programs management department, and who are all, you know, just running full steam on these construction projects, making all sorts of decisions and moving forward with stuff. So we've reached out to West Coast quite a bit to try to get some urban wood stuff done, but the appetite of the projects, they actually don't seem to have much of an appetite, which is unfortunate, but we're still trying. So not all.
I think there's a big effort to be carbon neutral in a lot of those projects. You know, urban wood's a good way to, you know, strike to that net loss by securing that carbon in those trees.
Sure, I know that.
You know that.
Yeah, and so yeah, there's the rub. I gotta, you know, find the time to educate.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's something you've been telling me for a while too. But yeah, it's tough.
Yep. But keep on keeping on, man. Wear that tree hugger moniker with pride, you know?
Yeah, hell yeah. Yes,
That's
absolutely. So yeah, we're good. But we're moving forward. We're trying to plant as much as possible. We have an initiative we call 1,000 trees, and we're not even a year into it, and we've got several hundred down. Excuse me, a few hundred down, so several hundred to go. But we're moving forward, and I need to try to find out how I can. Don't laugh, don't judge, but I need to figure out how I can contract grow Eucalyptus cladocalyx. It's part of our historic urban forest. So we have to have them in particular in a carved out area on campus. So if anybody wants to give some ideas, I'm looking at a couple different nurseries, but if anybody knows how I can go about just starting the conversation on that, that'd be helpful. Thanks.
You got it. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate you chiming in and bringing your input. And yeah, that is a challenge. New construction is, you know, one of the biggest challenges with trees is that activity. So get your voice heard, man. Raise your hand a lot. Ask questions. So we're regional council is happy to support you. If you ever need like a letter from the regional council supporting that kind of thing, we'd be happy to kind of put something in writing that, hey, we think you guys should be doing a better job of protecting your trees. It's not you saying it, it's the regional council. Maybe there's a little bit of leverage that, you know, hey, you know, you got a third parties, you know, looking at what we're doing over here or something like that.
Right. It's not just me. That's helpful.
Right.
Thanks.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, if you want something like that, please reach out. We can definitely do that. And I think that's a big chunk of what this organization is about is helping where we can. So cool. Thanks, buddy. Let me see if there's another person. Is anybody else raising their hand that I can call on? How about it's interesting. I see people from the city of Irvine on the call. Aaron, Casey, are you guys there? Can I call on you to give a little info? What's happening in the city of Irvine?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone.
There we go.
My name's Casey Knight, one of the municipal foresters for the city of Irvine. Just a lot of moving parts within the city. I have a lot of studies going on, especially with the shot hole borer infestations throughout the region. We put together and we've continued a regional task force. It's Emerging Tree Pest Task Force of Orange County. Many land management, landowners and government agencies come together to discuss different types of invasive pests and best management practices. So it's a cool thing. We kind of had a 9 to 12 month hiatus just because of COVID, but we're able to meet just like you are here through a interactive platform. But other than that, it's good to see that San Diego region is so proactive, and we'll be attending a lot more sessions.
Awesome. Appreciate you being there, man. Cool. All right. Anybody else I can pick on? I'm looking at the list of names here. Sorry. How about Ed? Ed Drobnicki, you there? I see Delia raising her hand. Delia, you want to chime in? see your hands raised, Delia. Eric Cass, do you want to say something? Shooting in the dark here.
Hey, how's it going? Can you hear me?
There we go. How you doing, buddy?
So
how's your world?
we're doing pretty good. We're still working on getting cleaned up from that little bit of a windstorm we had.
So real quick, who's Eric Cass? Can you introduce yourself? Sorry.
I am the parks arborist for the city of San Diego. So I manage the tree crew and that does all the trimming in the parks throughout the city. Yeah, we have 400 plus park sites that we deal with a small crew. So it can be a challenge at times, but we're doing good. As I was saying, that windstorm we had quite a few limb breaks and trees fall over. Luckily, no injuries, no damage, anything like that. Working on getting some plantings together in some of the more disadvantaged neighborhoods. Later this month, we're going to be doing some planting up at Mountain View Park. And with all these plantings, we're actually installing irrigation along with all these plantings just to help get these trees established and healthy in the long run. Also doing lots of palm weevil removals right now. We've removed several in the last couple of weeks, and we have many dozens to go still. I know we're going to be working with West Coast Arborists, hopefully in the upcoming months. With a grant that SDG&E put together, Megan Shaw was a big help with that, and hopefully treating some of our larger palms here in Balboa Park, trying to save them as we've lost most of them at this point. And yeah, that's what we're up to. Yeah, that South American palm weevil is pretty devastating. I know Orange County, you guys have not felt that one yet, but anytime you want to come down, Casey, Aaron, you want to tour this thing, it is nasty. It's killing Canara and day palms. And not just that, I know Megan in our meeting prior was giving us some other species that it's now going after. So that's a pretty devastating bug, and it's going to have a pretty significant impact on a lot of our favorite palm trees. So, but yeah, sorry for your challenges there, Eric. Yeah, it seems like it's not going anywhere, but we are looking to make our next topic related to bugs. I see there's a question, what species are they affected by the palm weevil, Eric? Yeah, I know we have Canara day palm is one of them. What are the other ones you're seeing? Was it Brahia edulis? Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Megan? Yeah.
Brahia edulis and the Jubea, the Chilean wine palms. We've seen it in that as well, which is very unfortunate.
We've also seen it on the Phoenix triclinata, a really nice ones, and we are now suspecting it may be going to some other Brahia species, and I've got an unknown unidentified palm that it's confirmed on. So that may be in sable genus, but I'm waiting for a positive ID on that.
Crazy bummer. So yeah, that's the species that's affecting. Again, our next Regional Forest Council meeting, we're going to tackle bugs quite a bit. I think that's going to be the target of our discussion. That'll be April 7th, I believe. So if you want to mark your calendars for that. So, but thank you both, Megan and Eric, for chiming in. Ed, you want to say something? I got you. You raised your hand there. You can unmute yourself.
Nope, I didn't mean to raise my hand on that one.
Oh, no, not you. Ed dropped. Nikki raised his hand.
Oh.
Ed? Oh, Ed's trying to call me. Anyway, so I know Ed's with the golf courses, the golf division for San Diego, and I know he's got all sorts of pest challenges as well. So, but looking at the time, we are down to the wire. It's at just about 1:29. And if we don't have anything else that's overly pertinent, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to an end and just thank you all for participating. I'm a big fan of ending meetings on time. I thank you all for participating and look forward to seeing you on April 7th, probably virtually. Actually, it will be virtually. And stay tuned. So that's all I have. Thank you, guys. Have a good day. Take care. All right.